The Insider's Guide to Energy podcast is proud to announce the Data Science mini-series in collaboration with Forbes, problem-focused and solution-driven. On this show, we will be covering everything from data science fundamentals to trading, forecasting, working with large datasets, and even skills required. Make sure to follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts so you don't miss out on new episodes.
Welcome to Insider's Guide to Energy. I'm your host, Chris Sass, and with me is Selena. Selena, welcome back to the program as always. I'm excited to have this week. Tell me what you think is going to happen in this episode of the Data Science series.
Well, we have Sven Orlowski with us from EWE Trading, and he has so many years of experience in all those topics that we want to talk about: data science, digitization, energy trading. And I'm very excited to hear from him what has been happening the last years, and especially what's up with future.
And I'm excited not to be talking to vendors who want to sell in, but the users and the ones that are getting the value out of the data science and energy, because I think this is where the rubber meets the road. So what I think we should do is, Sven, welcome to the program.
Yeah, many thanks for having me.
So I'd like to start. I have a good idea. We said you're from EWE. You've been on the podcast and the main show in the past, but maybe just a real brief who you are for our audience and relate that to the data science audience that we have listening to this series.
Yeah, I'm, as you say, Sven Orlowski. I'm the managing director of EWE Trading. EWE it depends a little bit on how you count, but we are definitely in the top 10 of Germany's energy companies. And I've been working here for now longer than 5 years. And in the past 5 years, we did a complete revamp of the trading organization. It was some very historically grown IT and data landscape. And what we did here is that we introduced a very much modernized landscape, heavily focusing on data, integration of models, and integration of processes. This relates a little bit, I would say, to my professional background. By education, I'm a chemical engineer, but I never did much engineering. Maybe thank God for all people that live in Germany. I'm rather focused on models and computer and actually data science stuff. So my first job in the energy trading industry was being the head of the analysis department at Vattenfall Asset Optimization and Trading. And I dare say that I believe it's not so common. Even as a managing director, I can actually write Python code that somehow works. Yeah, so that's, I would say, my background. Yeah, done numerous jobs in energy trading, usually being focused around modernizing trading organizations, if you want.
That's so interesting, and I'm sure we're going to get to that later when we talk about programming, about skills required, about Python. The first question that came into my mind is if we dissect those two buzzwords, digitization and data science, maybe you can shed some light on the relationship that you think that is between that, because I mean, one is of course the groundwork for the other. But with your experience the last years and the revamping of your organization, maybe you can say something to that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So first of all, digitalization, what's the definition? Yeah, I believe that each and everybody would define it differently. For me, digitalization is usage of IT and data in order to make good decisions and improve processes. That is for me digitalization, yeah? And all that belongs to it. Yeah, that has a technical background, that has a methodological background, but it also has a cultural background. Yeah? So that is the basis. And then there's data science, which for me is also a bit hard to define. Obviously, you look into data and I mean, that's all you do in trading organization in order to come to good decisions. Yeah, and to reduce risks. But at the end of this, again, it all centers around decisions. And now the question is, what is data science? Yeah? Is some linear regression model already data science? Is some artificial intelligence, neural network data science? Of course. But maybe then there's other stuff. And I believe that hugely from a methodology point of view, trading organizations are still stuck in this linear regression or regression thing, but they also use quite heavily, I would say, optimizers. In my mind, this also has to do with data science. But each and every organization, even us having undergone this major revamp program, we are still struggling with the data in science. To really have congruent data available, correct data available, to make it easily useful to not just experts but all the whole organization. I would say that is the overall context in which we are in here at EWE Trading, and I believe almost everybody in the industry.
So as we are progressing, and you implied that there's that everyone's kind of at a different stage along, or maybe a little earlier in what we call data science for some. Maybe it makes sense to figure out how we got to where we are. I know from your background, you mentioned you were at Vattenfall. Um, this whole data journey isn't new to you, right? You've been working on this probably throughout your career, I imagine. Um, Help me understand what you've seen and what you've been doing professionally to help tee up for today's world. What incremental steps have taken place to get us to where we are in the data science journey today?
I would say, first of all, if you look at the data itself, so when it comes to a trading organization, there were usually only, if you want, time series and positions. Time series like prices or power station or user consumption of energy or whatnot, and positions because you had to keep them in order to fulfill your obligations towards your counterparts, and because you wanted to track your positions for P&L reasons and to know what you already bought and what you sold and so on. And next thing that came on the agenda was, I would say, orders. So huge order box of intraday trading, heavily being this need coming up from also like algorithmic trading. So orders are now, I would say, the third major data point that plays a role, and it's totally different from time series or positions. If you want to look into it from a technical point of view, what are the questions that interest you? And now more and more other data enters the scene. I would say, especially weather data, obviously, resulting in huge grip files and weather forecasts and stuff like this. And all the time, the amount of data that you're looking into is increasing. It's first of all the sheer sum of the data is increasing, but also the complexity when you look at queries onto the data. So a grip file, you could ask how differs weather between different locations. But the other question that naturally comes to mind is, how does weather change specifically in one location? And how does the forecast differ from reality? And what is reality if you only have measuring stations in a grid of, I do not know, 50-kilometer grid length or whatsoever? So, and this obviously brings then a huge impact on the methods that you use to analyze data and to come to good decisions. So it's no use in having huge amounts of data if the decisions that you have to do with like traditional methods take longer than what time you have for this. So I would say that's the point that drives us all. And so if you look at the initial data of positions, it was simply multiplying how much did you sell times whatever amount or which power used, and then times what kind of price it had. That was relatively simple. But now if you look into the grid files and you make predictions, for example, if intermediate grid points where a certain wind farm is located and you don't have direct measuring data for it, that's a completely different story. And that's, I think, where a lot of trading organizations are struggling, but also research is struggling to a certain degree.
Are we getting down to that granularity then? Do you see IoT type devices helping? Is that part of the solution? Or is it basically that the data is out there, it's getting access to the data? I mean, there's plenty of weather data available that goes down pretty much to pretty small regions and pretty near real time from what I can see.
For the weather data, it's a problem, because to have good weather data, is a very complex thing. It's not like an IT technical thing, but you have to know what kind of weather station you're looking at. You have to look at the rotor height. And as far as I'm concerned, there's not so much weather data available, at least not in Germany. If you consider the density and quality of data that you have when you compare it with huge costs that might come from ancillary services and basically mispricing a certain wind park if you have a direct marketing or if you would like to close a PPA around it. Yeah. So the impact of having wrong weather data is huge, yeah? and you never know really. Yeah? So if the wind farm has been in operation historically for years and years and years, you have a certain amount of weather data. But if it's a new one, and we all have to build huge amount of renewables in not just Germany, but the whole European system, then predictions are not so simple.
And then you also mentioned the whole point of this is about basically, as I would call, data-driven decisions, right? And using the data to make better decisions. How is that process changing today for, let's say, someone at EWE, making decisions, a trader or someone like that? What's different now than, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Obviously, it becomes all more automized and algorithmic, if you think. Yeah. Usually, what we have is we are like a company that is not focusing so heavily on speculation. Yeah, we are mostly focusing on managing portfolios of customers or renewables. And as far as I'm concerned, there are two different kind of algorithms. One is the one that speculates. It tries to predict prices and then makes like a speculative decision on is the price going to rise or going to fall. But the other class of algorithm is simply like you have a new position because your weather update changed. Yeah, and then for the lowest possible cost, you want to dump your positions into the market. That is a completely different class of algorithms. And I think the algorithmic challenges, but also the improvements that were made over the last years are huge. Yeah. So first of all, using algorithmic trading is you have to do it in intraday trading. Yeah. So it's simply like a must-have conditions. And I would say 5 years ago, that was maybe not completely exotic, but relatively. Yeah. Today it's totally normal. Yeah? So that is one of the main things. And especially the second class of algorithms has basically the characteristic you have to be fast. Yeah, everybody gets a new weather forecast from EMSIS, and all are suddenly long and have to dump positions in the market. Yeah, so and the changes that are coming with this is you have to have a very powerful IT infrastructure, usually based on a messaging system that really enables you to be quick in these decisions, but also to dumping the positions in the market, because this is the self-inflicting case. Everybody wants to sell, and suddenly prices drop. That is logical, and vice versa.
So is there competitive advantage in the models, competitive advantage in the ability to act, or the amount of compute you have? Where do you get the competitive advantage in that model you just described?
I think maybe thankfully so. We are not in the banking world yet. I would say I would rather focus on having a good model at the time being than being super hyper fast, only 100 meters away from the exchange or whatsoever for data only travels with light speed.
What does all this mean for the organization, for the traders? How did their profiles change and the skills that they need to perform well?
I think not just for the traders, but for the overall organization, data literacy totally increases. Yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, in the modern trading organizations, there are like 3 kinds of jobs. There's still some stuff that needs to get manually for whatever reason. Yeah, there's like, I do not know what, but there's some stuff that needs to be done manually. And then for me, there are the consumers. Yeah, the consumers are people, typically, for example, a controlling department or partially also risk management. Yeah, that simply takes data from, you could say, data warehouse. So it's not raw data, but it's already like a bit structured data that is structured to a certain usage, for example, looking into positions or whatsoever. Yeah, and that makes mostly reports out of this. Yeah, and then there's a third class which I call creators. And these guys can really do data. They take data, they analyze data, and they either are in a position or like they have the competencies to basically automate processes with this, yeah, or to basically do trading decisions, yeah. And for anything else, and for example, for the consumer, this means usually, even on this level, you have to understand, for example, the concept of a relational database. What is this? Yeah? If you don't understand the concept of a relational database, at some point of time, you won't be able to work here anymore. Yeah, so it's maybe a bit harsh to say, but it's all going in this direction. And one thing we found out here, culturally wise, is it's not even that hard if you do it slow enough and if you make it safe enough. Yeah, so I'm a bit like a social optimist in this sense. Yeah, if you give people a safe environment where they can toy around with data, good things will come from it. So our controlling department here, maybe not being the most intuitive department for looking into data and making good things out of it, is really for me the example of people who were like Excel affine, but really managed to change slowly over time into some like unit which makes great use of data, comes up with creative ideas for cash management, for scenario analysis, and whatnot, simply because we have a decent architecture that's easy to access and where you can't screw things up operationally wise. So they feel safe in toying around, and we have really huge successes with this. Yeah.
Eh, Has your staff, you're saying, has, as long as they've gone incrementally and slow, they've been able to evolve, or many have evolved. Um, what about new entrants? If you're bringing in someone new today, what if you could have any skill set that you want, right? Because now it's a blank slate and you can hire from the ground up. They may not have the institutional knowledge of EWE's history, but they could have some technical chops. What would you want there?
So first of all, we seldomly have a job ad out where we don't write Python, at least advantages if not required. Yeah. So this is one criterion. So you should have some IT literacy. Together with it goes data literacy. Yeah. So you have to understand that you have to clean up your digital workbench as well as your like traditional workbench in a machining shop or whatsoever. Yeah. And then we are looking for people that know how to translate this into business. Yeah, it's no use if you like the super duper data scientist, but if you can't look, or if you can't assume, or if you can't transfer your knowledge into valuable business ideas, it's pointless. Yeah, so that's what we're looking for, and I would say all traders that we employ have at least some exposure to programming languages, typically Python and data. And even some of the ones that were already employed when I arrived here 5 years ago, they really work themselves into this stuff and are using this. Yeah, we pretty much took care, and it's not all good and well. But if you like invest some time, even as a trader, you can use quite some features of our IT landscape in a safe and stable and also fast way.
I absolutely agree with you that that data literacy and IT affinity and programming are skills that are more important. Also in jobs that weren't required to have that a couple of years ago. But of course, every organization still has the traditional IT department and the business side. So I'm wondering, what are your ideas, or what is your advice for better understanding between those two departments? Because sometimes it's difficult because they speak different languages, they have different perspectives, and it's always an interesting task to have those two on the same page.
So first of all, it's not that we are not struggling with this as well. Yeah. So, but there are really some things where we made progress, and some things which we are still sorting out. So maybe to just like take one measure. So we have also on the like front office side, we have an analysis department. So some central analysis department. Yeah. For me, those guys are building what I call infrastructure models. Yeah. So these are really models that of huge operational impact to the organizations. For example, a forward curve, to give you some example. They have to run 24/7, high speed, always have to be available, no mistakes allowed, because we're mispricing whatever we do when we have like any bug in those. These are military grade code as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, so this can never fail, and these models are developed by analysis and together with IT brought into this like very safe state where they operate on a 24/7 basis. For me, the central analysis department is also some advocate of how to use IT in a responsible manner to the overall front office. So what we're doing now is we're starting to send central analyst guys that we employ new for some almost 3 months to the IT department to learn in depth what is important to us. How do you write tests? How do you write unit tests? How does our messaging-based infrastructure work? And whatnot. And the secret ingredient was hidden maybe in the sentence, is on one hand responsibility, yeah, and on one hand trust. Yeah. So and I can't totally quantify it. Maybe you should be more structured about this, but there's really some guys working at the front office where our head of IT is convinced that they're writing operationally stable code, which he is willing to deploy in his infrastructure, yeah, after some like automated test, and here or there also like having a personal eye on this, but where he's willing to deploy this without like greater checks in his super stable military grade infrastructure. Yeah. Then there's also responsibility. Yeah. What usually happens is, for example, if you're building a model in a trading organization, let's say, for example, some price forecasting model, then maybe in earlier times you started with an Excel sheet and you had a Python, and now you do it in Python, and then you toy around with it. At the beginning, it doesn't work, and then it becomes always better. And at a certain point of time, it becomes really important for the organization. And what we do is then we say, when it comes to responsibility, is you can do a lot of stuff in our infrastructure as like some guy working at the basis. If you do something that is not okay, ethically wise, commercially wise, or like downloading illegal data, not that it ever happens, yeah, then we make the person responsible. You really make the person responsible, not the manager. If some model that becomes important, that is, for example, like living at a desk and growing and growing and growing, if it becomes important for the organization and critical, and it's not transferred in a stable IT environment, then we make the manager responsible. Yeah, that's how we deal with this in a way, and we're pretty strict about this, because otherwise you get in a mess. Yeah, people don't up, and managers are also responsible that that basically the models and stuff that is developed in the department is updated and things like this. You know, so otherwise you will have security issues sooner or later. And at least that's the idea. It's working relatively well, but obviously there's always area of conflicts where the IT guys say, look, you haven't updated the following things in a while. It's now an automated check giving me like 100 security leaks or whatsoever. Do this or I will switch this off. Yeah. So that's what happens here.
So you talked about the personal accountability in giving accountability out. Um, I guess, and you mentioned Python quite a bit, which is a scripting language, right? It's a tool you usually use with other tools, in my experience. So, is there a core platform that you've been spending time putting in place to enable this? Because you described all kinds of wonderful things, but I can't imagine that a trader is from the ground up, writing more than the models or more. They must be plugging this into something to get to the data, or a common bus architecture or something where they're pulling things out.
Yeah.
Is that a safe assumption or not?
Yeah, that's a safe assumption. So maybe like it has two sides. So first of all, what is the centralized infrastructure or environment? And there we have like uh, almost all cloud-based databases or data pools for the like typical data, like time series, like positions, like orders. We are now like more and more looking into weather data. We are completely building our green portfolio management and direct marketing. We were building this up from the ground. We're doing this new. Yeah, so that's the last part that remains. Yeah, and then weather will play a huge role in this. Yeah, and this is all centralized. Yeah, it's S3 data buckets, partially also relational databases, some databases for positions, or you could call it a data warehouse, which we put on top of Endo, our trading system, so that people can look into position data and whatnot. So that's one thing, and this is totally maintained by the central IT organization. Yeah, so nobody has to play with it around. It's a cluster, yeah, and quite complex to manage. And then there's the other stuff. What should you have on the desk? Interesting question. Because you always have those versioning conflicts and whatnot, and we are looking into this right now. So how do we provide a trader or data analyst or risk manager at day one, or we now call it week one, with a working IT environment? Because if you have to install all the packages in Python and get all the system variables and path variables in Windows right, it takes you a month. Yeah? So, and we might come to the conclusion that simply deploying Docker containers with like a standard setup of Python locally at the desk, and the standard setup being like defined and maintained by the IT organization, could be a viable way to go in order to have you running relatively up and running relatively quickly.
So, all right. So I get the setup. How much of this is really mainstream from? I mean, you're giving me your myopic view, I assume, of EWE. So if I had other traders sitting there, are they going through the same evolution you are, and or is this unique to your organization and where you are?
I would assume that this is pretty much where all people are at the time being. We have a bit of an advantage because we got the mandate from our executive group management in the past 5 years to completely rebuild the whole trading organization. Yeah, that was first of all possible because of our size. So in RWE trading, simply can't do this. Yeah, it's too huge. Yeah. On the other hand, it was in a way easy to explain to the group management. I mean, we're not RWE trading, supply trading. So a two-digit million euro sum for rebuilding a trading organization already means something here. Yeah, but it was in a way easy to explain, but because the whole landscape was so old and producing so many problems that based on this like operational safety accountability principle of management, you could really argue, let's do it from the ground up. Yeah, and that was in a way an advantage for us. Yeah.
So yeah, you can see you see a question from our producer in the background who's a data scientist, and he's curious. You alluded to cloud infrastructure and things, but his specific question is how are you handling the increasing volume of data, compute requirements, storage requirements. You talked about weather and saying, hey, we don't have all the elements now, but as those pieces come to be put in place, we're going to end up with a lot of data and moving forward. So I guess the question is, how are you handling that?
I would say maybe I don't get the question completely, but I would say in the typical way. Yeah, it's all cloud based. No more local installations. Yeah, maybe a few here and there on some like desktop of a trader who's trying out something, but everything is in the cloud. We are like on Amazon Web Services, and then it's simply a question of money and processing power, and obviously that is still important on your model. Yeah, so it depends greatly on how clever you write your model, how fast and with what quality do you have a decision. Yeah, so my personal, like, if you want hobby, optimization models for example, power plant schedules or battery dispatches or whatsoever. And it heavily depends on how clever you formulate your problem. And suddenly solution time and processing power are like divided by 10 if you're just clever enough. Yeah? So it's not just a matter of throwing sheer processing power at a problem. It's also a matter of having good analysts in place. And sometimes it doesn't need if you just it's not enough if you're just intelligent. You have to have also some experience.
Especially with increasing data volumes, the question of data assurance, data quality becomes more and more prominent, and with all the pitfalls and challenges. And I believe that you have much experience in that area. So I would like to hear of your journey or of your advice when it comes to assurance and quality.
So for me, and there are like different sides to the story, and many people see it also in different ways. For me, the key role in this data quality thing is the data owner. Yeah. And for me, the data owner is a person. When you say data owner, always people believe that it means, oh, you have to correct wrong data, or you are the person that can decide who has access to the data. Yeah, maybe sometimes you do this in personal union, but at the end of the day, for me, the data owner is the person that is commercially responsible that we have this data and that it creates value. Yeah, and you simply feel like responsible and accountable for the data. So for me, this, in a practical way, or a good criterion to assign a data owner is you choose the person that has the highest requirements towards the quality of the data. Yeah, because what usually happens is, especially in a trading environment, everybody says, look, I need this data, I need shipping data, LNG, I need weather data of this station, I need price data for whatever exotic Romanian oil derivative or whatnot. And then it's never used, but it always has to be correct 100% of the time. Yeah. If you do this, you will end up with a zoo of different time series, data types, and whatnot. And this is in a way channeled. If you make persons responsible for the data, who has the highest requirements towards quality. So, for example, what usually happens is, for example, arbitrarily example chosen, you make the meteorologist per definition by function responsible for weather data. Yeah, and there's lots of weather data, obviously, and then what happens is then for example, a gas desk is having a sigmoid contract on a certain station and has like a high commercial interest in one of the data points out of thousands. Yeah, and then the complaints start. The gas desk is always going to the meteorologist and saying, look, the data was again like inaccurate your prediction was off by 1 degree and whatnot. And there was an error when we imported it and whatnot. And the meteorologists say, look, you're just one customer. I have thousands, the direct marketing department. We would like to do in the PPA and whatnot. I have other customers as well. Why don't you take responsibility yourself for this data? That doesn't mean that you by yourself have to correct it. But if there's a mistake that is heavily affecting you, then please take care that the problem is solved for yourself. You can come to me, I help you, but the responsibility for this data, and also if you should keep it on the longer run, is yours. This is contrary to another setup where you have some centralized data cleansing department or whatsoever, or data department, which simply all the time grows. Yeah, and that might be again some viable concept for some RWE supply and trading or for some Vattenfall organization. But for us, being like 120 persons, it's simply too huge. Yeah? So we try to bring responsibility and accountability for data in the organization itself. But you have to have a data owner. No data in our system where no data owner is willing to take responsibility for, because then simply, obviously, nobody needs it.
Going back to something you said a little while ago, where you talked about the efficiency of models, right? It reminded me of the old days when we used to do assembly code or something like that, and you wanted to get videos out of assembly code, and it was trying to be really efficient in what we were programming. What I look at here is a trader doing Python probably doesn't have all the background there. So do you have an overlay of folks that come in and then help optimize to get that efficiency? Because is it a reasonable expectation to think that that all your traders are going to be amazing programmers?
First of all, we have something like coding guidelines, and we're doing tutorials and whatnot. Usually, this professionalization and tuning of code happens in this evolutionary cycle of models when you say, I take it from something that is a prototype at the trading desk into this military grade IT environment. And then usually the IT guys look into this and say, basically, look, you made an SQL query like this. Are you really serious? If you do it like this, it's 10 times faster. It reduces also the load on our infrastructure. Yeah, so that's where this usually happens.
And then when does all of this become just mainstream commodity? Are we there? Is this how things are running today, or are we still cutting edge from all the things we're discussing in this talk today?
I think it depends on the organization that you're looking at. Yeah, so some municipality won't be there yet. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, but I think it's getting more and more common in trading organizations, and then depending culturally also on the size. Yeah, what I, for example, said is the head of the IT department knows every trader personally because we're just 120 persons. So in a way, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but in a way we can compromise a little bit on formal things like testing and courses and whatnot, because either you are in his name is Peter, and he's a really good guy. Either you are in Peter's circle of trust, or you are not. Yeah, and this is maybe some very blurry criteria to decide if someone can deploy or cannot deploy, but it's simply how it works here. And I believe, again, for a large organization, that is not the way to go. Yeah, so in a way, we have an advantage here. If that is cutting edge, I do not know. Yeah, but it helps. Yeah.
We talked about the journey of your work, of your organization. We talked about the status quo. What is your opinion? Where are we going to go from here? If you look into the crystal ball or just into the future, the next couple of years, what is going to happen in the industry at large with all the tools and methods that we have right now and that are still being developed, of course?
Obviously, there will be more and more automation, not just for trading decisions, which obviously always first because they have a high commercial impact, but also on processes. Yeah, I mean, I do not know how far ASA is with their compliance checks on all those trades and monopoly and whatnot, but why not look into fraud by using AI methods? That is being discussed everywhere, partially also started. But there's this huge number of things where you can improve processes. Yeah, use AI, for example, to find out some whatever things that pop up in back office process, like wrong invoices or things like this. Yeah. Then there's still other stuff where I would say in the industry we are relatively new to digitalization. Yeah? For example, if you look at the whole guarantees of origin stuff with thousands of different certificates, it's not just a problem of IT, it's a problem of standardization. But if you would like to book certificates from one account to another in different registers, it's a nightmare. Yeah? So there's still like some obvious potential for getting more digitalization. It doesn't necessarily have to do anything with data science in the first place, yeah. But this is like huge stuff for the all, huge amounts still to be done for the all over digitalization journey. As far as data science is concerned, I think we will see more speculative trading also on the term horizon. Not many people are, I think, trading algorithmic based term, yeah, like calendar products or whatsoever. I think that is relatively new still to come. Depends also a bit on the liquidity situation in Europe in certain markets overall, because usually in order to do good algorithmic decisions, you have to have lots of useful data that only comes if markets are liquid. Yeah. I don't see data science growing much into this typical origination business of non-standardized deals. I think this will, for the long time, be a domain of humans where you really have to negotiate with your counterpart sitting on the other side of the table. What are the risks that you would like to drop off? What can we take on? What is the price of this? How do we structure a deal? I think this will be like something where obviously humans will always be involved.
In the toolkit that you have available to you from the vendors in the market, um, how rich is that today? Are the tools there? I mean, obviously, we talked about scripting language. We talked about cloud services, but you're starting to get pretty specific, right? We have data from weather. We have different things. Is the tool belt deep enough or big enough to meet your needs today, or are there things that you're looking for that don't exist yet in the energy market?
I would say there are more tools than we as an organization can check out. Yeah. Up to now, we never struggled in having or not finding the next shiny tool to do whatever we wanted. Some techie guy at the IT department always comes up with the hottest stuff which we should try out next. So I don't have the impression, maybe as a like managing director being responsible also for the continuity in this organization, I'm a bit like risk averse. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, we have more tools than we can responsibly use at the time being.
And then you did mention the one challenge, I think, is you talked about the data coming in and kind of standardizing it or going across recs between different groups. So are you working quite a bit with unstructured data as well, I assume? So you have all kinds of data that you're working with. And is that been challenging for you, just having all the different types? I mean, throughout this conversation, you've given us time series. You've alluded to different data types, but is there a learning curve there, or is that just kind of fundamental for what you're doing?
Obviously, we have unstructured data, yeah. So it shouldn't be unstructured, but for example, plant data or contract data with customers, especially for like contracts in around renewables, is still pretty unstructured in a way, yeah. But up to now, it never really was in the focus. Yeah, so there's so much areas where we still can make profit out of looking at structured data, which I just mentioned. Yeah, that I would say the unstructured data has not been so much in our focus up to now, and there's lots of other stuff that we can do with the like again typical candidates like position, weather data, time series, order books, and so on. Yeah.
Cool. So then, as we're coming up to time, any final thoughts or questions? Because I mean, this has been a great journey for me, but I want to give you any final thoughts here.
Well, I have a kind of a hobby question because data visualization is something that I work a lot with, and I was wondering how you would measure the value of visualization, or how you use it in your organization when it comes to decision support, decision preparation?
So first of all, the consumers usually use Power BI. Yeah, so that's what we use because it's a Microsoft environment and it feels like if you come from Excel or Access, it feels somehow like still intuitive and so on. And I'm usually, as like managing director, more of being focused on the consumers because I always do the longer term stuff and I need to prepare our planning for the next 200 years or whatsoever. Yeah, for the EWE Group, and then the aspect of visualization is obviously huge because you're explaining, at least to some kind of outsider of the trading organization, you're explaining what are our ambitions, what are our needs, and so on. And you have to tell a story around this because otherwise you will never get your resources like risk capital, cash, people, or budget, or whatsoever. Yeah? So this is, from the strategic point, this is obviously extremely important, but then it has to be characteristic of to tell a story in a good way. Yeah. The other stuff is if you're doing real-time decision at a trading desk. Yeah, then you're not telling a story. You simply act on data that is hopefully visualized in a good way and in a way where you basically see kind of the same stuff each and every day, so that you're like getting used to your tool set when you're under time pressure, that you, in a way like a jet pilot, can act on something that you are accustomed to. We also made some like technical decisions around this. I think some month ago we actually changed it, but I can't recall the name anymore of the standard type of graphical environment we used around it. It was some like dashboarding thingy that enables real-time data display. Does this answer your question? So it's a more like ad hoc based instrument cockpit-like attitude and technical setup than the other thing.
Yeah, and the trader has to recognize what has changed because he has the same view every day and is very quick to grasp what's going on.
Yeah, and it's also used to supervise algos. So no algos are running unsupervised here. Yeah? So we're using this also to look at algos. Yeah? Good. Final thoughts? I do not know. As you say for yourself, it's a journey, yeah. But up to now, it has been a great one, and it was mostly fun, I dare to say. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to share with us and our audience on Insider's Guide to Energy podcast about your experience and what you're seeing from the industry. I appreciate your time. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you.
Thanks to you guys.